The K Factor by Harry Harrison. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Greg Marguerite. The K Factor by Harry Harrison. We're losing a planet, Neil. I'm afraid that I can't understand it. The bald and wrinkled head wobbled a bit on the thin neck, and his eyes were moist. Abravanel was a very old man. Looking at him, Neil realized for the first time just how old and close to death he was. It was a profoundly shocking thought. "Pardon me, sir," Neil broke in, "but is it possible to lose a planet? I mean, if the readings are done correctly and the K-factor equations worked to the 10th decimal place, then it's really a matter of adjustment, making the indicated corrections. After all, societics is an exact science." "Exact? Exact? Of course it's not. Have I taught you so little that you dare to say that to me?" Anger animated the old man, driving the shadow of death back a step or two. Neil hesitated, feeling his hands quiver ever so slightly, groping for the right words. Societics was his faith and his teacher, Abravanel its only prophet. This man before him, carefully preserved by the age-retarding drugs, was unique in the galaxy, a living anachronism, a refugee from history books. Abravanel had single-handedly worked out the equations, spelled out his science of societics. Then he had trained 7 generations of students in its fundamentals. Hearing the articles of his faith defamed by its creator produced a negative feedback loop in Neil so strong his hands vibrated in tune with it. It took a jarring effort to crack out of the cycle. "The laws that control societics, as postulated by you, are as exact as any others in the unified field theory universe." "No, they're not. And if any man I taught believes that nonsense, I'm retiring tomorrow and dropping dead the day after. My science, and it is really not logical to call it a science, is based on observation, experimentation, control groups, and corrected observations. And though we have made observations in the millions, we are dealing in units in the billions. And the interactions of these units are multiples of that. And let us never forget that our units are people who, when they operate as individuals, do so in a completely different manner. So you cannot truthfully call my theories exact. They fit the facts well enough, and produce results in practice. That has been empirically proven. So far. Some day, I am sure, we will run across a culture that doesn't fit my rules. At that time, the rules will have to be revised. We may well have that situation now on Himmel. There's trouble cooking there." "They have always had a high activity count, sir," Neil put in hopefully. "High, yes, but always negative. Until now. Now it is slightly positive, and nothing we can do seems to change it. That's why I've called you in. I want you to run a new basic survey, ignoring the old one still in operation, to re-examine the checkpoints of our graphs. The trouble may lie there." Neil thought before he answered, picking his words carefully. "Wouldn't that be a little unethical, sir? After all, Hengly, who is operator there now, is a friend of mine. Going behind his back, you know." "I know nothing of the sort," Abravanel snorted. "We are not playing for poker chips or seeing who can get a paper published first. Have you forgotten what societics is?" Neil answered by rote. "The applied study of the interaction of individuals in a culture, the interaction of the group generated by these individuals, the equations derived therefrom, and the application of these equations to control one or more factors of this same culture." "And what is the one factor that we have tried to control in order to make all the other factors possible of existence?" "War," Neil said in a very small voice. "Very good, then. There is no doubt what it is we are talking about. You are going to land quietly on Himmel, do a survey as quickly as possible, and transmit the data back here. There is no cause to think of it as sneaking behind Hengly's back, but as doing something to help him set the matter right. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Neil said firmly this time, straightening his back and letting his right hand rest reassuringly on the computer slung from his belt. "Excellent. Then it is now time to meet your assistant." Abravanel touched a button on his desk. It was an unexpected development, and Neil waited with interest as the door opened. But he turned away abruptly, his eyes slitted and his face white with anger. Abravanel introduced them. "Neil Sidorak, this is Costa. I know him. He was in my class for 6 months." There wasn't the slightest touch of friendliness in Neil's voice now. Abravanel either ignored it or didn't hear it. He went on, as if the two cold, distant young men were the best of friends. "Classmates. Very good. Then there is no need to make introductions, though it might be best to make clear your separate areas of control. This is your project, Neil, and Adeo Costa will be your assistant, following your orders and doing whatever he can to help. You know he isn't a graduate Societist, but he has done a lot of field work for us and can help you greatly in that. And of course he will be acting as an observer for the UN and making his own reports in this connection." Neil's anger was hot and apparent. So he's a UN observer now. I wonder if he still holds his old job at the same time. I think it's only fair, sir, that you know he works for Interpol. Abravanel's ancient and weary eyes looked at both men, and he sighed. "Wait outside, Costa," he said. "Neil will be with you in a minute." Costa left without a word, and Abravanel waved Neil back to his chair. "Listen to me now," he said, "and stop playing tunes on that infernal buzzer." Neil snapped his hand away from the belt computer as if it had suddenly grown hot. A hesitant finger reached out to clear the figures he had nervously been setting up, then thought better of it. Abravanel sucked life into his ancient pipe and squinted at the younger man. "Listen," he said. "You have led a very sheltered life here at the university, and that is probably my fault. No, don't look angry. I don't mean about girls. In that matter, undergraduates have been the same for centuries. I'm talking about people in groups, individuals, politics, and all the complicated mess that makes up human life. This has been your area of study, and the program is carefully planned so you can study it second hand. The important thing is to develop the abstract viewpoint, since any attempt to prejudge results can only mean disaster, and it has been proven many times that a man with a certain interest will make many unwitting errors to shape an observation or experiment in favor of his interest. No, we could have none of that here. We are following the proper study of mankind, and we must do that by keeping personally on the outside, to preserve our perspective. When you understand that, you understand many small things about the university. Why we give only resident student scholarships at a young age, and why the out-of-the-way location here in the Dolomites. You will also see the reason why the campus bookstore stocks all of the books published, but never has an adequate supply of newspapers. The agreed policy has been to see that you all mature with the long view. Then, hopefully, you will be immune to short-term political interests after you leave. This policy has worked well in turning out men with the correct attitude towards their work. It has also turned out a fair number of self-centered, egocentric horrors. Neil flushed. Do you mean that I... No, I don't mean you. If I did, I wouldn't say so. Your worst fault, if you can call it a fault since it is the very thing we have been trying to bring about, is that you have a very provincial attitude towards the universe. Now is the time to re-examine some of those ideas. Firstly, what do you think the attitude of the UN is towards Societics? There was no easy answer. Neil could see traps ready for anything he said. His words were hesitant. "I can't say I've really ever thought about it. I imagine the UN would be in favor of it, since we make their job of world government that much easier." "No such thing," Abravanel said, tempering the sharpness of his words with a smile. "To put it in the simplest language, they hate our guts. They wish I had never formulated Societics, and at the same time they are very glad that I did. They are in the position of the man who caught the tiger by the tail. The man enjoys watching the tiger eat all of his enemies, but as each one is consumed, his worry grows greater. What will happen when the last one is gone? Will the tiger then turn and eat him? Well, we are the UN's tiger. Societics came along just at the time it was sorely needed. Earth had settled a number of planets and governed them, first as outposts, then as colonies. The most advanced planets very quickly outgrew the colony stage and flexed their independent muscles. The UN had no particular desire to rule an empire, but at the same time they had to ensure Earth's safety. I imagine they were considering all sorts of schemes, including outright military control, when they came to me. Even in its early crude form, Societics provided a stopgap that would give them some breathing time. They saw to it that my work was well endowed and aided me, unofficially of course, in setting up the first control experiments on different planets. We had results, some very good and the others not so bad that the local police couldn't get things back under control after a while.